Although the theater of the Spanish-speaking communities of the Southwest dates back to 1598, contemporary Chicano theater began in 1965 when Luis Valdez founded the now legendary Teatro Campesino, the farm workers' theater. Little did Valdez know that his raggle-taggle troupe of striking farm workers would inspire an entire generation of Chicanas and Chicanos who saw and see theater as an artistic tool in their quest for social justice. The Mexican-American, indeed all the Latinos in this country, have suffered an invisibility in the media, and this is one of the reasons our theater is so necessary. We hope, through these discussions, to bring you closer to a theatrical movement through the eyes of people who are making it happen. Okay, where to begin with Luis Valdez, who basically created an entire movement of theater. The Chicano theater movement is, in many ways, I think, your brainchild. You inspired it. What does it feel like to be the father of an entire theater movement?
Well, in some ways it reminds me of something that I heard or read, forget about Leon Trotsky, who said that there comes a time, occasionally, in people's lives, when you realize if you don't do something, it'll never happen, whatever it is. Whether it's a revolution or a social change or a strike position, you realize that somehow you have a role to play. And so you take it on, you play the role. And my realization came out of my need to write plays and to see them produced, and realizing early on that there was no context for me within which to exist. Mm-hmm. So I had to do everything that I could in order to make that possibility happen. And in doing that for myself, then I ended up doing it for other people. Mm-hmm. So, and I didn't want to be alone. Who wants to be alone, you know? Theater is very much about community, and it's not just the community that watches, but the community that creates theater. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I began in a very conscious kind of way with that thought in mind. I had some models in mind. The German theater of the 1920s, particularly, which I had studied in college, you know, Bertolt Brecht particularly. Mm-hmm. But also I think that whole spirit of the German expressionist theater, which dealt with questions of national identity and political questions of social equality or inequality. The Mexican theater of the 1920s also, coming out of the revolution, Teatro Tepache, mm-hmm. the Carpa tradition, mm-hmm. and also the example of Garcia Lorca with his company, La Barraca, very much a playwrights company, mm-hmm. traveling in a truck, mm-hmm. which in the 1930s, the early 1930s, must have been a very unique experience because, again, trucks were just coming into vogue then.
Mm-hmm. There are so many plays, you know, we talked a little, I mean, just fleetingly about your inspiration, what got you started in theater, and I know that you were basically doing theater as a child, you know, in the backyard from what we've talked about in the past. And then you created el famoso Teatro Campesino. It went on to international recognition and acceptance, and you then went on to create some of the hallmarks, really, of Chicano theater. And I don't know how you could possibly synthesize, but would it be possible to tell me some of the highlights for you before Zoot Suit? Because we're going to jump, you know, we have 35 years of history here, and I'm wondering if you think of anything, you know, because we're talking a little bit about Bernabé, which is not a well-known play. Most people would not know what Bernabé is, and probably your best-known play is Zoot Suit. Would you agree?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, in the world.
Except for Vendidos. Los Vendidos is my most published.
Isn't it?
Yeah,
isn't it? That's why? Why do they only ask you for Los Vendidos, or is that the only play available?
Well, it's gotten so I have to tell my agent, you know, I'm not going to allow Los Vendidos, choose something else, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because they keep repeating that same thing, and I'll be like Lope de Rueda, you know, with one little play
One
in
little
all
play.
the anthologies, you know. I want these publishers to be aware there are more works. And Los Mendigos is fine, and it strikes a chord, but it's simplistic, you know.
And I teach a history of theater, and we all teach history of theater, and in this, all the anthologies now have Los Vendidos. That is the, not just the Chicano representative play, it represents all of the U.S. Latino playwrights. And I think as classic as it is, and as you know, I've directed it how many times, taken it to Europe, what else of your works, what would you prefer of your works, your plays get published in these anthologies of world drama or American drama?
Well, you know, I'm really sorry that I don't have a single copy of The Theft, my first play. It disappeared in the late 70s. I loaned it to somebody and it never came back. It was a mimeograph copy to begin with. I don't know why that happens, but it does. You know, it's happened to me. That's a very interesting play. There's a lot of Christian political overtones. It's the seed, really, from which all my work springs, and yet it's gone. You know, it's a three-part play, which came to me early one frosty morning. I believe it was 1959, and I was walking from my apartment to class, because I was going to college, and a 20-minute walk, and in those 20 minutes I figured it out, right? It was a flash, and I came home that evening and I sat down and I wrote it, and so within the space of 24 hours I'd written my first play.
Really?
And I can appreciate that now, looking back and saying, whoa, what a flash, you know. But it's not just a play, it was the seed of everything that's come since, and I don't have a copy. Okay,
but,
so
but you recall it, because if you know that it's a seed of everything that has followed, then you have it in, you have at least the structure in your mind.
I should describe it sometime, so I've got a record of it.
Definitely.
But then came, I began to work on The Shrunken Head, basically. That took 5 years to define itself. I thought at the beginning that it was going to be a thing called The Sons of Pedro Montaño. And then for a while it was in Spanish, Los Hijos de Pedro Montaño. And then I figured out, my conflict there was I couldn't connect with reality in either English or Spanish. When I went into Spanish, my Spanish was not good enough. And besides, the reality was not Spanish enough to justify the use of Spanish. There was too much English involved. And when I went to English, it was the same problem. There was too much Spanish involved. So I found myself in a rather absurd, in-between limbo land. And I began then to focus on the visual imagery, the symbolic imagery. And The Shrunken Head of Pancho Villa emerged originally as an acto. I don't know if I've told you that. I woke up one morning with this idea of, I didn't even call him an acto then, but it was a baseball game. And that what it involved were the Mexicans against the Yankees. And what they were using were, the Mexicans had these cactus bats made of cactus. And the Yankees had these oak sluggers, right?
Oh, God.
And what they were pitching around was The Shrunken Head of Pancho Villa.
Oh, God.
Right? And I described it, I think, in a half page or so. And I looked at it and I said, what can I do with this thing? This isn't a play. This isn't, what is this, you know? I liked the title, The Shrunken Head of Pancho Villa. And so I took that and moved it over The Sons of Pedro Montaño, which was the relation of a father with the sons and the mother, of course, Cruz. And eventually, the theater, the absurd genre sort of saved me, because I had an excuse to be absurd. And so I was able to go absurd. And it began to settle into what it became. It's a very well-structured play, actually. There's a lot of beats in it, and it's not as strange as people think it is when they see it.
I think people have to see it.
Yeah.
I have my students read it, but because it's bilingual only, the bilingual students are going to understand it, or only the bilingual audience. And I've seen it performed with a bilingual audience, and they loved every minute of it. But it doesn't, for the non-bilingual person, simply it just doesn't read as well. So that's not a play that I think could represent, you know, our theater because of the bilinguality. Do you agree? If we were to say, okay, this is the play we're going to put in the anthology that's going to have one play from Luis Valdez, as wonderful a play as it is, I'm thinking of I Don't Have to Show You No Stinking Badges.
As the play that you would put in there?
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful, wonderful play. It shows, well, You know what it is.
Well, I would put in my next play, Jorge.
The play that you're working on.
Yeah, because I mean, it's,
okay.
again, you have to, I think, talk in terms of a trajectory, a lifetime, and like the Shrunken Head is me in my 20s, you know, and to some extent the Badges is me in my 40s. Zoot Suit being me in my 30s, believe it or not. This next one is me in my 50s, and so as you age, I mean, not that I have just one for each of those, but as you age, you cap on life, and you try to put these things down on you know, in some form that will pass to the next generation.
Most people know you probably because of the movie La Bamba, which was not your first movie. Zoot Suit was not your first movie either. Everybody thinks that Zoot Suit was really your first experience in the, you know, Hollywood. You're now working on some other projects. Can you talk a little bit about the Cesar Chavez motion picture?
Not a lot, except that it just deals with Caesar, you know, and a 2-hour movie is just a 2-hour movie. It's a compressed form of storytelling that, and in today's highly commercial environment, you know, it imposes tremendous stresses and strains on the storytelling and on the history. I think Caesar was very aware of this. I talked to him about making a movie of his life for the last 10 years of his life, you know. He was very resistant. He didn't want it. I think he knew inherently there would be problems because he was someone who was out of sync with a lot of our most basic values. I think hypocritically we subscribe to what Caesar had to say, the nonviolence, the spirituality. But in actuality, I mean, he was running counter because he was not aggressively commercial. He was not aggressively middle class. He was going in the opposite direction. He was espousing poverty, avowed poverty, which very few Americans will subscribe to. You know? And
yet, early on, he said, what we are fighting for the farm workers of this country is a middle class, you know.
Yeah, that was
salary.
that was the I think the key to some of the conflict that he had with the radical volunteers that left early on. You know, the ones that I came in with. You know, there was a big confrontation that occurred with Caesar one day, happened in the Teatro actually. That there were criticisms as to where the union was going. It joined the AFL-CIO, where it was drifting. Some people were starting to get paid in the offices. People thought that was not right because most people were still getting $5 a week. And then they were questioning what's going to happen if the union wins all these contracts. Are these farm workers going to become middle class? And Caesar says, well, that's up to them, but it's probably inevitable. Yeah, that's what we're fighting for. So that disillusioned a lot of these people. They wanted a revolution. Right? They saw social revolution, whatever that is, you know. And so he was aware of that, but he was also imposing at the same time a very strict discipline with respect to personal behavior. He felt that the way to achieve social justice was by staying as disciplined and as true to the farm workers in terms of their values as possible.
I think that you understand that the Teatro Campesino, your work with the group, the collective process, probably did more to bring the farm workers' struggles to a public consciousness than newspaper articles. I mean, you didn't reach millions of people, certainly, because it was on stages that you performed, but you would tour, you know, to the universities and to community centers and union halls, whatever. You all were the spokespersons for the farm workers' struggle. And we've always felt that theater has a role, you know, and certainly at that time, we didn't even exist. I don't know that we exist today in the public consciousness since the media, you know, doesn't even cover us, but we can talk about that later. But I'm wondering if you still feel that theater has a social responsibility. Let me start with that one.
Absolutely. For me, it's never lost it, and I think it first and foremost, it has a social responsibility, has a social function.
Are there theaters in this country that you would say, here is a theater that is fulfilling that goal?
A theater company?
Yeah, I mean, well, there are a few theater companies, but in other words, your Teatro Campesino was a theater company. The Chicano theaters that emerged after that were companies, and you know, we have now the second or third generations from that of other people doing theater, but not necessarily as companies. But they're committed. The Teatro Campesino continues a commitment to a certain kind of theater. It's evolved, certainly, over the years. It's never been the same thing. Are there other theaters, is what I'm asking, that, or maybe just playwrights? Are we talking about individuals whose aesthetic continues to reflect a commitment to social change, which is how the Teatro Campesino was born?
In the same way, probably not. I'm not even sure the theater can sustain that.
No. Well,
because you know, one of the things that I tell people now is in order to understand where we are in time, you have to, for instance, if we were to talk about 32 years, you know, or 35 years of activity, you'd have to understand that if the teatro had begun in 1925, 32 years later it would be 1957. And just think in terms of social changes, right? The social differences between 1925 and 1957 are enormous. And so for us to understand our lives and the changes that have occurred between the 60s and the 90s, you have to understand what the stresses and strains are. This is another time. This is not the 60s anymore. And I suppose that there were many people in the 50s still living in the 20s. I don't want to make that mistake. And I see that as one of the problems that we had in the Chicano movement to begin with, that a lot of people got stuck in a frame of mind and were unable to change. You know, they were unable to transform themselves. And the Teatro Campesino has always transformed itself. I have always transformed myself. I'm not the same person that I was. I don't pretend to be. But I do acknowledge that we've come from a certain place with a certain orientation. That in a lot of ways is the 20th century, you know. We are evoking the thoughts and feelings of the 20th century. But if you look at the artwork itself, the stuff that people were doing in the 1920s is a lot more original and interesting than what's been done since. I think in the 1960s, in some ways, we were trying to recreate the 1920s. And so the theater was part of that push. And so we drew from whatever was alive in the 20s, you know, the Teatro Tepache I mentioned, you know, Lorca, the German Expressionist theater, the Carpa tradition, all of that became, Brecht, all of that became part of the echo of the 1920s that occurred in the 1960s. I'm still faithful to that because it's still the 20th century, but not for much longer, you see. It's when the 20th century passes, we're going to see a transformation psychologically, conscious and unconscious, in people that will lead to new modes of expression, probably more conservative modes of expression, because that tends to be the pattern of most new centuries. There's too much time, you see, that opens up suddenly.
But beyond a turn of a century, we're changing a millennium.
Yeah,
and
also
that has even broader, you know, I mean, talk about
huge
significance and ramifications. And to me, yeah, it's very much towards a conservatism, but as each century has changed, so have the conditions. When you know, I've always credited the 30s, the theater of the 30s, the agitprop, which started, of course, in the 20s, but the 30s, when the Depression was happening, were echoed in the 60s. Then we went, you know, so if it's a 30-year cycle, in the 90s, we sort of missed it. We, you know, after the 80s, the 90s have been a very, very, for me, a very too stable part of our evolution, it seems to me, as artists.
Well, I think that the 90s have to be about summing up, okay? The 90s have to be about making the transition. The fun is over. And the 80s allowed us a little bit of experimentation, not much though. The fun was over really by the mid-70s. When the Vietnam War ended, you know, it was basically over. And which is pretty characteristic, I think, as centuries go. You mentioned the Millennium. And in Pensamiento Serpentino, I mentioned August 16th, 1987 as a turning point, the Seacat. And again, because it was registered in the Aztec Mayan calendar that this millennial change would occur. Now, whether you pick it up in 1987 or you pick it up in 2033, which is another, or 2012, you know, these are different dates that occur. It's still the same millennial change, you know, it's 1,000 years, give or take 30 or 40 years, right? Which you can do. But we're into it. We're into this tremendous shift and change. And to answer your question about the Chicano Theatre, I know that we have a larger role to play in the world theater than is apparent today. We are the parent of many, many future Americans and world citizens because we are Latinos. And they're going to just give integration, let integration happen. Let love and couples go and couple. and we're all going to be related, okay? And I also need to mention that I feel an affinity toward Germanic theater, you know, and, because that's part of me. And so, because we're integrating that too, and we're integrated into that. So what I'm saying is that it's not just the Chicano theater in that sense that's impacted. If it's a millennial change, it's a millennial change that'll spread over a lot of generations and in a lot of different ways that we can't even measure. And one of my favorite playwrights, when I read him in school, was Plautus, the Roman slave, right? And of course, he's key to a lot of modern classics. You know, the boys from Syracuse and Shakespeare. You know, they picked up on him, the miser, and so forth. I picked up on him because his taste, his sensibilities made sense to me. Now I don't know because that's because of the Roman influence in my life way back when, or just because I happened to connect with him. But I did. But I think that if you ask Plautus, you know, do you know that, you know, 2,000 years from now, they're still going to be talking about your work? He'd laugh, you know? The point is that no one knows whose work is going to survive. Very often the most common, ordinary, humane, and human kinds of things survive for centuries and centuries. And it'd be nice if the Teatro Campesino and the work that Teatro does survives at least 100 years, you know, but that's not important. What's important ultimately is that we've had an impact in our own time, and we've been able to measure it.
In terms of your playwriting, could you, I know that you're working on a new play and you want to direct your play, and something that people have always asked the director / playwright is, when does the playwright begin and when does the director take over, or are you continually in dialogue with yourself as director playwright? Could you tell me a little bit about your process directing your own play?
Well, you know, I think it's both a strength and a weakness, frankly. I got into the game of directing because there was no one else really that could direct my plays, and my playwriting professor, a man by the name of Dr. Harold Crane at San Jose State, delightful mentor who took me under his wing, and I used to go into his office. We had a one-on-one class, you know, special study, and he would read my stuff and then comment and really very, very, very supportive, even of the Teatro Campesino later. He didn't like my politics, but he did, when he saw the actos, he said, these are eminently publishable. Why don't you publish them? And so we did. He just barely lived to see the success of Zoot Suit. He was very sick, and he couldn't go down to Los Angeles because he was dying, essentially, cancer. But he did see the success of the play, and I was very happy about that. We shared, actually, another actor in the movie, and John Anderson, who played the judge, was one of his early students.
Really?
Way back in the 50s, and so we shared him as a teacher, right? But in any case, the
dialogue.
The dialogue
between director, playwright. You said that
it came from Dr. Crane. He says, you know, there's no one else to direct this. You're going to have to direct this. And it was the Shrunken Head of Pancho Villa. And I said, but you know, I've never prepared for that. And he says, I'll back you up. Don't worry about it. And he did. And essentially, I learned to direct plays with his support. And I took on the Shrunken Head of Pancho Villa, and he was there, and he watched me to give me notes, and so he guided me through. And so by the time that I'd done the Shrunken Head of Pancho Villa, I said, this is fun. I can do this, you know. I think I want to do this. And then going from San Jose to San Francisco to join the San Francisco Mime Troupe, I became aware of a different process, a collaborative, collective process, led by a very strong director who was Ronnie Davis, with the tradition, the Commedia dell'arte tradition behind him, and a lot of new ideas, and a lot of 60s sort of political concepts starting to come in. So I picked up on that model as well, and so I really combined, let's say, the role of the traditional director with this new improvisational directing style to create my own role, and at the same time try to remain a playwright. Now that was a very difficult thing to do, because just being the director and the organizer of the Teatro Campesino was a 24-hour job. Just getting people to focus on what we were doing Now, people focus because of political reasons, because it was the Chicano movement, because it was the 1960s. They did not have to have that much training and never got that much training within the teatro. So it was really fly by the seat of your pants time. And the works had to be really rudimentary. I knew that as a playwright. Actually, my frustration started in Delano. I wrote a play for the farm workers that were in the teatro at the time. It was maybe a 2 or 3 page sketch, an acto. And I handed it out, and the campesinos grabbed it, and they could barely read it. They could barely read it.
Was it in Spanish and English?
It was in Spanish and English, but they could barely read it. You know, and so I took all the pages away from them, and I said, okay, no more script. We're just going to improvise it. So from then on, what I did is I used to write my pieces in outline form. I used to do what I would now call, in screenplays, a step outline, which is in the business is called a step outline of action. And then I would direct it, and then the workers would improvise, or I'd give them lines, and they would learn them on their feet. And that's where the early actors were developed. That developed a collective style for us that essentially remained in vogue for about 10 years in the Teatro Campesino. I found it much easier to structure dramas through the corrido tradition. So Carpe los Rascuachis, for instance, was based on a pre-existing corrido, which I learned from my father-in-law. Lupe and I had just gotten married, and we were visiting my in-laws in Dinuba, in the kitchen, and I had a tape recorder, and I taped my father-in-law singing this corrido, which was this long, tragic, baleful story, you know, about someone coming north. And I loved the music, I loved the melody. I didn't like the baleful tone. So when we began to sing it, we picked up the beat. But that became the substance of La Carpe los Rascuachis. We added dialogue, I added dialogue through improvisation, and it created a piece that evolved over 5 years again. By the time I started to work on El Fin del Mundo, I had a more firm grasp on the process and on the content, the style. So I wrote a corrido called El Fin del Mundo. It's in couplets and quatrains, you know, couplets and quatrains. It all rhymes. It's visual imagery. It's got dialogue in it. And in other words, there's some writing in there that I've never been able to take credit for because it doesn't exist. It doesn't have a place to exist. But it's a corrido, and it's interwound with the structure of the piece. But I designed it to work as a corrido. So I was really working within a narrative tradition, a musical narrative tradition, and at the same time evolving a drama out of it. And then we added dialogue and scenes and movement and stuff.
Well, and are you still, is the playwright in you still interested in the form of realism? Because you've never written what I would call, or anybody would call, a realistic play.
What is reality?
Touché. Okay, but in terms of the
you
genre...
have to remember, I mean, the one thing that and you talk about the Calavera tradition, okay, in my plays, or talk Lorca if you want. The thing is that one of the things that I've said, if death is real, what is reality? Okay? If death is real, what is reality? And, because it seems to me anything is possible then. Death seems to me the most real and unreal fact of our existence. Okay? And the fact that it must end. So how do you deal with that? And no one can tell you with any surety what happens after that. No one can.
Which is why people create religions, to try to answer that
And why they create theater.
Exactly.
Why they create theater.
Yeah, okay. But in every one of your plays, we are confronted with that question.
Yeah,
we are
Calaveras
confronted with
dancing
what
in your face.
is reality. No, not just the calaveras, but I'm talking about...
what is reality, yes.
You know, the whole notion of what is real and what is not real, beyond the question of what is death and how do we define that. I'm thinking of, I love, I don't have to show you those thinking badges. And on the one hand, I was mentioning earlier, I thought it should be the play that represented perhaps your oeuvre, although there's not one single work that can represent your work over how many years.
Well, you know what happened there, not to steal a thought, but just to add to it, is that a year after Badges was done in Los Angeles, a Harvard student literally came back to Los Angeles and committed some of the acts that Sonny in the play commits. He held up a burger bar. He had been an honor student and then went to prison as a reason. I think he's still doing time. But the thing is that what's reality? You know what I mean? It's art imitating life, life imitating art. Where does it go?
Well, and also that play was a reflection of your experiences in Hollywood, obviously, which is why I like it so much. You see, that play, it exposes Hollywood for all of its duplicity, for all of its racism, for all of its insensitivity, you know. Another issue that I wanted to discuss with you, you know, where are we going vis-a-vis Hollywood? Why isn't Hollywood, I'm constantly asked, why don't we see more Latinos, Latinas on television or in the movies, other than as the stereotypical roles that we seem to fit so easily? You're intimately involved in Hollywood. Do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, I think the Latino identity is not as simple as we sometimes make it out to be, okay? It's not a race, as you know. And the moment you start pretending that it is, you run into real problems, even within your own family. Because where do you begin and where do you end? It's very multiracial. You know, they're blacks, they're blondes, there's mixes, you know, there's Indios of all kinds.
But I'm not talking about, you know, ethnic characteristics. I'm not talking
but
about
if you're
the
going to
color
do it for the
of your
Latinos,
skin.
why not do it for the Yugoslavs? Why not do it for the Armenians? Why not do it for, you know what I mean? You're going to get into some ethnic characteristics here. Why not do it for the Turks?
Why don't we see Chicana or Chicano judges, lawyers on television? We now have a plethora of Latino. I don't see them. I see a plethora of Latino and Latina police officers. That's what we seem to be now stereotyped
Well, that
as, which
helps.
isn't
Baseball
bad.
players, you've seen Pedro Martinez and some, even they have them half black, but you know, you are beginning to see some athletics coming in. You're beginning to see some law enforcers coming in. You know, it's a gradual process, Jorge. It's a gradual process. And in
we
the
were
final
here before
analysis,
Hollywood was here. How gradual can it be, you know?
Hollywood is about the buying and selling of images. It is about the commercialization of lives. You realize that in order to become an actor, you have to commercialize your life to such an extent that you have to tend to it. I would hate to have to be, you know, I've always resisted, consciously and unconsciously, becoming too commercialized on that level. And I don't think directors should, anyway, to begin with. It's neither here nor there, but that's not really our role, you know. But to make a conscious decision, say, okay, I'm going to be an actor, director, writer that's well known, and I'm going to apply my image all over the media, well, you have to pay a price for that. You have to pay a price for that. You have to cultivate that. And it's a very small community. And I really see celebrities, and Hollywood celebrities, as slaves of a certain genre. I don't know if that makes any sense to people, but to be a director, you know, you have to have a certain kind of privacy. To be a writer, you have to have a certain kind of privacy. You have to be behind the work, not in front of the work. And I prefer, I don't want to be too far behind because you don't get any work that way, you know? But I wouldn't want to be up in front. And if I were, anyway, it would raise too many questions because America is not ready to handle yet the 500-year-old question of what are we going to do with the Indians, okay? It's the Indians that are going to answer it anyway. And I'm a 20th century Indio, you know, a product of the melting pot, to be sure, largely Indio. I'm asking all kinds of questions here that America's not prepared to answer, much less commercialize. And the thing is that it's going to take time to resolve. So what does America do? What does the world do? It goes with the in-betweens. It goes with the hybrids. If you look at African Americans, it's only recently that the real black African Americans have managed to make an entry. Before that, it was the mulattoes, right? It was the high yellow octoroons. It was the in-betweens, people that were half white. And Latinos have been there for a long, long time. Our white-skinned Latinos are in. They're in. They're matinee idols already.
But not as Latinos.
But what is Latino when you finally get down to it?
No, I'm just saying that the characters that they are playing are just anybody.
Yeah, but what is Latino in the final analysis? You know?
Well, what is Luis Valdez's theater in the final analysis? It seems to me to be your dramaturgy, the plays that you have written and produced have been about the Chicana and the Chicano, the Mexican. You know, with some exceptions of other characters. Stinking Badges, of course, has a Japanese-American actor, dancer in it. But by and large, your theater to me is sort of paradigmatic of what everybody else that has followed you has attempted to do, and that is to say, I am a Chicana or a Chicano playwright, meaning I write about Chicanas and Chicanos. Now, some people balk at that. You know, we have some non-Chicana, some Latino playwrights who say, I am a playwright. Not necessarily I don't want to be known as a Cuban playwright or a Chicano playwright or a Puerto Rican.
Why not? Everybody else is. I mean, you know, it helps if you have an English accent. You know, it helps if you're kind of English. You can say, yeah, I understand what English is.
So that's what. But I'm saying then that's what to me. I would like to see characters
but Chicano is
on
nothing
television.
that you can cast in stone. Okay, don't try casting it in stone because it won't be here. The Chicanos are those little birds that came from the south to the north. You know, following the crops. It was a term that referred to people that were on the wind. You know, they were migrants, and it was a transitional reality, if you will. There's no nation. There's no Chicano nation, so to speak. There's America. I refer to America as a whole. Then, you know, that I identify with.
But America is not a nation.
America is a continent. America is the new world.
The whole new world.
Yes.
In this country, when you say I am an American playwright, I think a lot of people read it as meaning I am not a this or I'm not a that. I am an American, as in, you know, I've melted. You've never melted.
Well, I have, but you know, you melt a jalapeno into the ice cream, it's going to be hot, you know. So I mean, it's they can try to melt, you know, as much as they can. I have to be what I am, you know. If I'm a hairy ball to somebody, you know, the cat spat out, that's what I am, you know. On the other hand, you know, it may have some nutrients that we need, you know. Who knows? The future belongs to those that are going to live it out there, you know, to those that can imagine it, as the saying goes. But I don't know the ultimate value. I do know that this question of identity is both very deep and very superficial. And ultimately, as a playwright, as a filmmaker, as a person of the theater and the drama, the sweetest reward for me in terms of artistic success is when I'm able to capture human characteristics that speak to all times and all peoples. When you understand what human hunger is, when you understand what a physical as well as an emotional hunger, what pain is, when you understand what fear is in all its levels, and pride, and those high moments as well as the low moments, then you're doing it. Then you're doing the drama, okay? And questions of identity or nationality or class, all that is bullshit in the final analysis. I can appreciate Oscar Wilde and the plays of I saw one recently in Washington, D.C., because he tapped into something. I don't care if he's talking about another class, another race, another people, another time. I tapped into what he was saying, you know. Oscar Wilde speaks very directly to me through his comedies because I know there's pain and suffering there, and I can appreciate that. Shakespeare the same way. I only hope that other people then reaching in the other direction can look at the plays of Luis Valdez and say, I can tap into this guy. I can understand what it is. I can understand what it was like to be a Chicano in the 20th century because he tapped into what's basically human. That is ultimately all we can ask.
Is that what you were aiming for with Zoot Suit? Seems to me.
Yes, I was I was trying to connect with a reality, and the first thing that I tried not to do was to look at the case and the pachucos from the outside. I wanted to be inside, and the pachuco takes us inside. The pachuco is the empowering device, and if you will, you know, in modern psychological terms, it's about the process of individuation and the superego and all of that, if you want to analyze it on that level. On another level, it's about the function of myth in all our lives. It's the myth that guides us. I've always believed in myth, because myth for me is the underpinning of reality. And the moment that we lose the mythological dimension, we lose a grasp of reality.
I think that a lot of our culture, and I mean in the broadest, quote, American sense, we teach, you know, students, and they're from all the varieties of cultures, but the majority are Anglo. And I say, what are your myths? They have no myths.
Yes,
Americans.
Yes,
well, they don't. These students don't.
None that they are willing to express. Everybody has myths.
Well,
Everybody
tell me about that.
Myths. What it means to be an American?
Well, no, the myth, the mythology, because, you know, you wrote, you've written plays that you've called mitos, you know. The acto you wrote is the Chicano through the eyes of man. The mito, or the myth, is the Chicano through the eyes of God. This is a well-known statement of yours. So what does that mean? In theatrical terms, you know, that the mito, your play, the mito is the Chicano through the eyes of God.
What does that mean?
When you wrote
I think it's the longer dimension in terms of time, perhaps. You know, it's what falls away as the centuries roll, what's left, and there's some things that the things that are left ultimately are very immediate. They're the immediate things, the things that touch your gut and your heart and your hunger. God, what is God? God is the longest perspective of time that you can apply to your life. If you can look at your life from an infinite perspective, then maybe you're looking at it, which makes a lot of things that we do very small. It doesn't mean that there has to be a lot of distance there. It just means that there has to be an understanding of basics. What are the basic values of your life? What are you about? You know, we're discovering, or perhaps revealing, exposing many dangerous, frightening things about human nature, you know, in our time, because now we have the video cameras and the documentation. It's never been any different. It's always been there.
Sure.
And the media, you know, was there. Media is like no different than what the Aztecs were doing, you know, ripping out hearts. I mean, if you kill your children, you know, you can kill your children. That's all. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are. It's La Llorona. But the thing is that God is able to see these things from an enormous perspective and see what the action is, you know, across centuries. And the action across centuries is that human interaction is inevitable, that people are capable of enormous brutality, and act quite nonchalant while they're doing it. Does this make us evil? Yes and no, depending on how you look at it. I think that we are all quite prepared to devour each other. We're cannibalistic. It doesn't necessarily make us evil. It just makes us human. But the higher notions then, as you go, is what is it that matters then? What matters then is what lifts us up. What matters is what makes us endure and transcend. And what that means is that, can you spread the goods around? Can you spread the good around? Can you spread the light rather than the dark? The pain will always be there, and we all share the pain inevitably. What do you do about the pain? And the function of art is to illuminate, I think, that conflict between the pain and the love, between the light and the dark, as always. And so God would tell you there's both light and dark. They're one and the same.
You have now been a distinguished faculty member here at Cal State Monterey Bay, where you're developing a whole new, I think it's a whole new investigation of where we're going perhaps into the 21st century vis-a-vis theater and technology, and you're calling it teledramatics. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, teledramatics is not television plays per se. I want to explain that. They're not teledramas. Teledramatics is a new genre, or the new term to describe a genre that has emerged over the last 30 years, certainly the last 10, 15 years. And the key element involved is digital technology. What that means is that the solution into which you put a lot of things, in which you are able then to dissolve a lot of different elements, is digital technology. And digital technology is having a worldwide impact on the way that we will live and are living our lives. What people call computers, of course, is an outgrowth of digital technology. What do they compute? Well, they compute digits, zeros and ones. And so we're talking about a computerized approach. Now, beyond that, though, it means that digital technology is allowing us an opportunity to deliver entertainment, or deliver education, or deliver information in new ways. And the television set, and the television set fused with the computer, the web TV, is really the key ingredient. This is another element that's going to allow this to happen. The television set combined with the computer, combined with the telephone, is another element that will eventually dissolve a lot of new cultural elements into a new mix. What this has done has provided tremendous new possibilities. You know, we're in the offing here of a whole new cultural expression that will become the 21st century, at least as far as I can tell at this point, you know, and I'm guessing like everybody else. I do know as a filmmaker that digital technology is transforming what is the movie business. In post-production, and it started really in video. It started for me in 1974 when we did La Carpa de los Rascuachis as El Corrido at KCET. And I edited, together with the director at the time, Kurt Browning, my first piece on a convergence system, which was not even completely digital yet, but it was a video system. It was linear editing at that time. Now they have non-linear editing, which means that you can, instead of having to put one picture after another, you can come in at any point and sandwich in whatever you want from any kind of direction. It's non-linear. Non-linear is one of those catchphrases like digital that describes the future. It means non-sequential thinking, which gets us into poetry. Because poetry, in its best forms, is non-linear. It's sometimes not logical for that reason. But sometimes it's, as Unamuno said, la razón de la sin razón. You know, the reason of non-reason. And so non-linear is very reasonable. And so non-linear combined with digital, combined with poetry, renders poetry. And in the theater, that means that there are new possibilities. The theater, as we know it, from its very inception, has been growing. Depending on where would you like to start? You can talk about the Greeks traditionally, as they describe the evolution of world theater, or go to the Chinese, or go to the Aztecs, or go into the Pacific Islands, whatever. You go into theater, you're going to talk about a performer standing in front of a group and doing stuff. And then eventually realizing if I stand on this rock or this stone or this milling stone, I can, this orchestra, I can then begin to address more people. And then that leads to the creation of an amphitheater eventually, you know, with stone seats and the amplification of the voice through the chosen hillside that allows you to address 10,000 people at once. And then the use of big masks that allows you to telegram your images to a larger and larger audience, and so forth. What the radio and television and film have done in our time is have provided new means to send drama out to greater numbers of people, right? That's the tele part. Tele is the Greek word which means distance. So telephone was sound at a distance, right? Telegram was writing at a distance. Television, literally pictures at a distance, you know, fly to the air. Teledramatics is theater at a distance. Now, it already exists as film. It already exists as television. It already exists as radio drama. But what we have now is this new possibility of live, direct broadcasts through the internet. The internet is like a field of interconnected channels of communication. And when we think of internet today, you tend to think of the desktop computer and you think of this monstrosity that sits, it's got a screen and you're attached to it. That's not where it's going, not at all. In the future, the very near future, I'll be able to dial it up here on my sleep. You know, they can do that now. They've got clothes that you can digitally compose music with.
Really?
That's right. They've got, well, I mean, it's digital technology. I'll be able to show you a movie on my jacket, you know, in due time. But the thing is that that's just the delivery system. What goes on it is still dramatic. Drama will never change. In a sense, drama has always been the same. And Aristotle, it seemed to me, defined it well enough. I can go along with that. And it doesn't matter to me whether you're talking about the Greek amphitheater or its opposite, if you really think of it this way, which is the Mayan pyramid, or the Aztec pyramid, which instead of like putting the audience up, puts the performers up in steps. And I have to refer to that, say Teotihuacan or Chichen Itza, because the ceremonial centers that were the cities made of stone in pre-Columbian America were theaters. People need to understand that. These were theaters. These were ceremonial centers that were created for purposes of performance. And everybody participated. They had performances of 20,000 people coordinated at once, standing on these pyramids and on these levels, coordinating levels of color and sound and image and movement. The so-called Avenue of the Dead in Teotihuacan was a huge stage. It wasn't that broad, and it's huge, certainly wider than the Santa Monica Freeway, you know. It wasn't because they had a lot of cars going through it, or a lot of horses and chariots. They had no horses, they had no chariots. They had people on foot. But these people carried objects and emblematic flags and images with which the whole city participated in performances. And this, genetically and culturally, this is part of my heritage as a Chicano playwright. And it is only as far away from me, okay, as Shakespeare is. And as a matter of fact, Shakespeare was writing 400 years ago, in the late 90s, in the 16th century. And these presentations were just being phased out in Mexico at that time. The Maya gave it up. But the stone theaters that they built, again, think of it as the inverted Greek amphitheater. It is the other way around. They go up. These are delivery systems. These are teledramas that were performed, and the means of distribution was a heightened space. And so they were able to really project their performances. And of course it involved real death, and it involved real blood, and they went down to the nitty-gritty. But we're getting there, you know, with a lot of the talk shows and Jenny Jones and stuff, where you're getting to see a lot of violence in theater. You know, Mike Tyson ripping off Vander Holyfield's ear.
Yeah, but those are all performance. You know, those are performative, as the scholars would say. We're going, you know, talk about theater. You know, the transformation. I'm still looking for where is there an actor involved in this? Is there somewhere, even though it's going to be digital, are there live people that start it and then it becomes something?
Well, absolutely. Machines can't do this stuff by themselves. You know, the machines sit there. The human involvement begins right at the very beginning. It's a question of design. It's also a question of the delivery. I mean, when do you broadcast this stuff? But it'll be available 24 hours a day, Jorge, eventually. What digital technology is going to do is that it's going to open up a whole new field that's going to swallow up what we recognize today as radio, television, movies. It creates another ambience. The same way that television swallowed the movies and radio, this new field, teledramatics, is going to swallow movies, television, radio, and so forth. Doesn't mean they won't exist. It means that it's going to contain them in a wider frame of reference. So that means that the use of drama, for instance, to teach history will become immediate. The use of drama to work on psychological problems will become real. We will return back to the global village. You know, again, we're talking Marshall McLuhan's global village. In a very real sense, it'll be a global Indian village in which someone who has a dream, in American Indian times, the dreamer could come out and share his dream and involve the whole tribe in reenacting that dream. You'll be able to do this because we'll be living in an electronic global village in which the dream can be reenacted on the spot through the use of this new technology. Now, I'm talking about the uses of green screen. I'm talking about the uses of live actors. I'm talking about the uses of music. I'm talking about the uses of language. Language particularly. Language I'm talking on camera now, it's nothing but language. It can work very well with teledramatics because it's useful. You know, it can still function. It's one-to-one in the same way that conversation is. Movies aren't comfortable with language completely. It's a visual medium in which language is reduced down to its basic essence. Television perhaps less so. There are more talk shows on television. But still,
but
television...
But a talk show is not a drama.
That's right.
You're saying it.
So I'm talking about the essence of it all, which is drama. And it has to do with action, with dramatic action, with the clash of polar opposites, with the evolution of polarities, you know, clashing and creating a third alternative, right? This is drama. This is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That's drama.
What do you tell your students, you know, when people come to you and now that you're a professor and you're in an institution, what do you tell the young people who come to you and say, I want to do what you do, Dr. Valdez?
I get very spiritual basically at the beginning. You know. I also get very practical. Depending, I ask them what do they want to do. You know, first of all, that we all know in some ways. You know, you only need to ask yourself, what do you want? Again, I mentioned that if death is real, you know, what is reality? Well, you can cook your own dream here. You know, you really can. And I mean, this is America, and God bless America, and you know, you can have whatever you want. I guess that's the most distinguishing characteristic about America, is that we believe that so deeply and profoundly. And some of us live it. You know, you can do that. I never suspected when I was in the fields that I would become a movie director, for instance, you know. But I never decided I wasn't going to. I could never be. So it opened that possibility for me. So really, I tell my students, what do you want to do? You tell me, right? And if you're an artist, where are you speaking from? Where is your heart? And I lapse into poetry here. You know, I start talking Aztec poetry. If you can touch your heart, you know, you can begin to sense what it is that you want to do. Okay. Stay creative, stay fluid, be prepared to struggle. Don't feel sorry for yourself, because everybody has it bad. It's a tough road to hoe for everybody, regardless. Particularly the minority students. I think that we sometimes make a profession, you know, of being sorry for ourselves, and we can't afford to do that. You can't afford to do that. Turn whatever's a negative of your life into a positive. Learn that trick. Yeah. And create.
Okay. Thank you.